I would like to call the Board of Administration meeting to order. And the first order of business is roll call. Ms. Hopper, please.
Henry Jones.
Here.
Margaret Brown.
Good morning.
Rob Fechner.
Good morning.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Maw.
Present.
Lisa Middleton.
Present.
David Miller.
Here.
Stacy Oliveris.
Excused.
Arena Ortega.
Here.
Ramon Rubacava.
Here.
Teresa Taylor.
Here.
Shonda Wesley.
Excused.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee. Here. Mr. President, all is in attendance with Stacy Oliveris and Shonda Wesley excused.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hopper. And please be aware that this meeting is being transcribed by our court reporter remotely. So we want to just let you be aware of that. The next item on the agenda is approve the timed agenda. So we need a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Taylor, second by Mr. Miller. A discussion, seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. The item passes. Thank you. So good morning again, everyone, and it's nice to be back home in our auditorium and to have our team and some stakeholders present with us today. It's been much too long since we've seen each other in person, so this is a welcome home event. I want to thank Marcy and the team for getting the building ready for our return and for the protocols that are in place to keep us all safe. Hopefully, this will be the first of many more meetings in person. Last week, our nation celebrated Veterans Day. It's a time that Americans pay their respects to those who have served in our armed forces and those who are currently serving. For one day, we stand united in respect to our veterans. Today, we want to continue the celebration and honor the veterans that are part of the CalPERS team, our members, employers, and stakeholders. I'd like to welcome Rod Zombek, Chief of our Health Account Management Division. Before joining the state services, he served in the U.S. Air Force for 11 years as a Russian linguist and interpreter. We are honored to have him here to lead us in the pledge. Rob?
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Rob. I want to thank all veterans for their service to our country. We're grateful for their dedication, their sacrifice, and their courage. I want to take a moment and congratulate David Miller on his reelection to our board and Jose Pacheco, who has been newly elected to the board. David, we look forward to our continued working together, and we are pleased that you will be here with us for 4 more years. And we will welcome Mr. Pacheco at our meeting in January. Now, turning to the CIO search, and I'm just going to indicate that we've had a subcommittee of board members, and we will have a full board discussion of that later, but Ms. Frost will elaborate on that process going forward. Now, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege. Today marks the last board meeting of our colleague, Margaret Brown. Ms. Brown was elected to this board by active and retired CalPERS members and began her service in January 2018. Over the last 4 years, she has encouraged dialogue and debate as a member of the board and always welcomed views of members and employer stakeholders. We have a resolution from the board for your service to CalPERS. It reads that CalPERS board, individually and as a body, express our appreciation to Margaret Brown for her contributions and services to the system and extend our best wishes to her in her future endeavors. Ms. Brown, would you join me at the end of the dais? Anyway, I'm not going to read all the whereases, but now therefore be it resolved, the CalPERS Board of Administration individually and as a body express our sincere appreciation to Margaret Brown for her many contributions and outstanding service to the system and extend our best wishes to her in her future endeavors. Ms. Brown. Congratulations.
Thank you, President Jones. I just want to say that my 4 years on the board has been exciting and tumultuous at the same time. I think most people know that I was here to serve not the system, but the 2 million beneficiaries that rely on the system to operate openly, and with transparency. And I hope that continues, and I may not be on the board, but you still will see me. I just know that. Thank you very much for the proclamation. Thank you.
I understand one of our members would like to make comments about Ms. Brown's resolution and service. So, Mr. Jelensik.
J.J. Jelensik, and I'd like to start by congratulating Mr. Miller and Pacheco on their election. We all know what to do, but we don't know how to get reelected once we have done it. John Claude Juncker. I want to thank Margaret Brown for being more focused on the first part of that quote than the last part. When I was on the board, every leak was my fault, even if the board had not been informed of the incident. When I left the board, Margaret took my place. She was the reason the public found out about Ben Ming's Form 700 problem, even though she, like most of the board members, had not been told about it. Only 3 other board members had been told, and yet Margaret was this, we all know, was the source of the leak. Margaret always focused on what was the right thing to do for the beneficiaries. She recognized that the goal was to pay benefits. She did not focus on the social goals or what would make her popular with her fellow board members, in case you hadn't figured that one out. It goes without saying that she understood the staff worked for the board, not the other way around. She felt the board needed to make informed choices, even if that meant more board meetings were needed. She noted that the discussion of important issues was frequently cut short or jammed through because it was getting late. She questioned and challenged the information the board was provided, and maybe even more importantly, the information that was not provided. The board was, and always is, given the information to support the decision the staff has decided the board should make. There's no need to worry their pretty little heads with contradictory information. She wanted the board to examine the weaknesses identified by the internal audits. She did not agree that the board could do so only with staff's permission. She questioned the excessive and illegal use of closed sessions. She believed that since she worked for the beneficiaries and that the beneficiaries had a right to know what was being done with their money. She questioned the expansion of PE, especially when the board's adopted capital market assumptions show that PE does not pay for the risk, does not pay on a risk-adjusted basis. She pointed out that even the industry does not claim high risk-adjusted returns, just high returns. If risk doesn't count, I would point out to the board that the payoff at the roulette table is 35-1. She challenged PE Pillars 3 and 4, which were designed to create new billionaires, but failed of their own illogical nature.
Mr. Jelensik, would you conclude your remarks? We've allowed you 3 minutes.
She opposed the hole in the ground. She believed that healthcare risks must consider the health characteristics of the insured, not the financial risks of the insurers. She actually listened and considered public comment. Margaret, I want to thank you for your service. I want to congratulate you on maintaining your integrity. You may have lost your seat, but you can still look at yourself in the mirror. There are more important things than power, and I thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Chief Executive Officer's report. Ms. Frost, please.
All right, thank you, President Jones. Let me see if I can get organized here. So on behalf of management, I'd also like to thank Ms. Brown for her service to CalPERS over the last 4 years. We have appreciated her engagement during committee and board meetings and know that when we have different perspectives, it does make the system much stronger. So I know this is a special time of year to be with family, and something that she and I have spoken about in the past is our grandchildren. So I wish you and your family a happy holiday season, Margaret. I also want to take just a moment to note how nice it is to be meeting in person again after a long hiatus. While it's still too soon to be open to the public for our members and most of our employees, we have started our transition back into the office. And I'll give you a bit of an update on that later in my report. But 83% of our team members have been vaccinated, and our weekly testing process has been set up and is working quite smoothly after a few little bumps when we first initiated it. Team members can use an app to make their weekly appointment with an on-site testing vendor. We want to make this as flexible for our team as possible, so we are also issuing vouchers if they're more comfortable being tested in that manner. Moving on to our asset liability management work. On Monday, the investment committee did choose a new asset allocation for the next 4 years. That would keep the discount rate at the 6.8%, which was put in place through the risk mitigation policy. That new strategic asset allocation does lower overall risk to the fund compared to the current portfolio, while also improving diversification with the approval of the leverage allocation. That decision completes nearly a year's worth of work to analyze all the global financial markets, the capital market assumptions, evaluate our investment risk and where those opportunities may lie, and then also address the long-term liabilities of funding member benefits, which is what we're intended to do here. That effort also included significant outreach to our stakeholders, a very important part of the process. And I'd just like to thank the board and all of the stakeholders for their participation and their engagement. Now that you have made your decision, we will be bringing back the implementation steps through agenda items early next year. I'd like to spend a bit of time talking about our climate change outreach and COP26. We continue to stay an active advocate for climate reporting disclosure and to engage with the companies where we're invested to transition to a low carbon economy. That's why Ann Simpson and Yulia, who leads our new private equity data convergence project, which you heard about on Monday, participated in COP26, the conference, over the last 2 weeks. They had the opportunity to engage in several conversations, made significant connections with world leaders who will help us carry out our fiduciary duty to pay benefits to those 2 million members over generations. Anne was able to serve as the CalPERS delegate to the conference, which gave her numerous opportunities to advance our principles and our values. We were able to showcase our work on Climate Action 100+, which is now recognized by the United Nations Framework on Climate Change and brings together investors around the world responsible for some $60 trillion in assets. We also launched our updated net zero company benchmark, which now includes indicators for a just transition that would address the impacts related to workers, communities, and supply chains. The Climate Action 100 benchmark now also includes accounting and audit, which will be a focus of our engagement and our proxy voting in the coming months. The impact, we think, is quite clear. Bloomberg New Energy Finance has calculated that the companies we've engaged to commit to net zero by 2050 represent 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions, or roughly the annual emissions of China. We spoke in several sessions about the potential for investors to drive change through investment rather than divesting assets, which would simply pass into new ownership. And that new ownership may not carry the same values as CalPERS. I know the controller had an opportunity to speak at several sessions as well, her work on Ceres, her work here at CalPERS, and I know she really enjoyed the event as well. Excuse me. COP26 also saw the launch of the International Sustainability Standards Board, which will develop new metrics for 144 markets around the world. We'll be working with the SEC to ensure a global approach here in the United States. CalPERS has supported this work from the outset as a member of the IFRS Advisory Council, as data and corporate reporting are a priority in our sustainable investment strategy. And Ann just did an update for you all yesterday on this as well, or on Monday. As a member of the United Nations Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, which we've been a partner for the last 2 years in that initiative, we also supported the launch of a Glasgow initiative coordinated by Mark Carney to bring together asset owners, asset managers, banks, and insurers to making finance the driving force to address climate change risks and opportunities. But we do have unfinished business, both on government targets and new measures, which are sorely needed for institutional investors. We also need carbon pricing, which CalPERS has been a very strong advocate and voice here in the United States on that topic. We'll continue to work on these through the next year, ahead of next year's meeting, and that will be hosted by Egypt. So our strategy of advocacy, engagement, and integration through partnerships is delivering results, and will continue to drive change as part of our fiduciary responsibility to protect our members' assets. And Ms. Simpson will be providing an update through the TCFD framework on the board's education session in January. As President Jones indicated, we are continuing our recruitment for our Chief Investment Officer. Earlier this month, the board subcommittee and I interviewed several candidates. We will be moving forward with second-round interviews with a number of those candidates before the full board and myself, which we're in the process of scheduling for mid-December. Let's move on to our educational forum recap. So starting with last month's forum, which was held virtually, and I think what we have discovered by these virtual education forums is that we're able to get many more participants, individuals who would not normally be able to attend in person. We're hearing from our public employers that the virtual format is working quite well for them. So this year's event featured 2 days of the educational sessions, along with exhibits and consultations from our team. We had nearly 3,000 people register, with about 75% of those registrants actually attending. Just for reference, the industry average is about 50% participation versus the signups. Overall, the forum did receive high marks from those who attended for both the content and the availability of the information through the exhibit booths and consultations. Recordings of those sessions and PowerPoint presentations, along with all of the resources, are available to those who registered through mid-February. So in keeping with some tradition, we presented our annual Spotlight on Excellence Award during the opening ceremonies of that event. The award honors outstanding public service and is a peer-nominated award coming from CalPERS' contracting agencies. This year's recipient was Monica Espinoza with the City of Orange. Monica is the Human Resources Director for the city's 700 employees and is known for doing everything she can to support her team, the organization, and the residents of the city. Her story is an inspiring one, and so I think it's worth taking a few minutes this morning to watch a video that we produced for her.
I just wanted to let you know, Monica, that you are the recipient of the CalPERS Spotlight on Excellence for 2021.
For the whole state?
For the whole state.
Get out! What?
Congratulations.
Oh my goodness, thank you!
I couldn't think of anybody more deserving in our organization, and really anybody that I've worked with. She is the epitome of professional, and she always has the best interests of employees at heart.
Public service to me means giving back to the community, to the organization, to your employees. It's about leaving things a little bit better than what you found them. My name is Monica Espinoza, and I'm the daughter to a retired mechanic and a retired seamstress. And I'm the oldest of two, and from a very young age, my parents taught us the value of working hard with an emphasis in faith and serving others. I believe that Orange is such a special place because we have such a deep history. It's just so great to see families come together and enjoy each other in such a rich community. I joined the city in general 24 years ago, specifically the Orange Police Department. I loved the ability to forge strong relationships, the ability to be part of the greater good that ultimately keeps this community safe.
We're stronger together when we have solid relationships, and especially with our HR partners. And Monica has definitely embodied that. She's embraced that. She understands the importance of a strategic partnership. And I truly believe that one of the reasons why we have such a strong culture and department, and all our departments in the city of Orange, is because of Monica Espinosa's leadership.
Monica is the most caring person I know here at the city, and she always is trying to do the right thing. And she has a saying that the right thing is not always popular, and the popular thing is not always the right thing. And she lives by that motto each and every day. It's so important that we keep that as public employees, and we keep that mentality.
I like to view HR as the conscience and the heart of an organization. We pride ourselves on hiring excellent employees and pumping those employees out to various operating departments. Our role is to be a business partner and assist with the entire gamut of HR needs. We have a wonderful 750 employees that show up, that are here, are humble, and do the work, all to serve the greater community of 140,000 residents.
Monica is intelligent, she's collaborative, she is the quintessential people person, a very compassionate and empowering leader and supervisor for our team. She is so conscientious, and all of that while really being a master of her craft and having a working knowledge of all facets of human resources in the public sector.
Monica has an unwavering commitment to all of our employees, and she does everything she can for this organization. She does everything she can for the employees. She does everything she can for her team, and her team knows how much she means to them. That is the theme that she works under, is that unwavering commitment to everybody that she works with, and her unwavering commitment to this organization, to this city, to make sure that we are always running at our best.
I never do the work for fame or recognition. You know, I always approach it with a humble heart, and I was just thrilled with the news and just deeply honored. I think it's important to have an attitude of gratitude every day. The sun rises for all of us, and it's what we choose to make of the day. So I'm so humbled and honored by this prestigious award today.
Congratulations, Monica.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Well deserved.
So I think Monica is a nice reminder of the reason that many of us do our jobs. So thank you for that. Turning now to our stakeholder forum, which we have determined will be virtual this year as well. That will be on January 18th and 19th, if you want to put the save the date on your calendars. We have gotten some feedback from our stakeholders that they would really prefer to have fewer topics and go into a deeper dive, if you will, on those topics. They've also expressed interest in having opportunities to have more interactions with the board as well as management. So we will be setting that virtual format in that manner. And then I always like to spend a little bit of time talking about the Our Promise campaign that ended just last week. This is the annual giving campaign that provides state employees with a chance to designate charitable donations to the charity of their choice through a payroll deduction process. There are many organizations, as Mr. Fechner indicated yesterday, many organizations and individuals who are really needing of community support right now. And so, the challenges over the next 2 years have really just highlighted that need even more. So I'd like to say thank you to Kelly Aoki and Fritzi Archuleta for chairing this year's campaign. Tim Taylor served as the vice chair. And then a big thank you to Anthony Sweeney for overseeing all of the division coordinators who helped to make it easier for our employees to donate. And then one last item to report, another good news item for CalPERS and some of the work that our teams are doing. Our CalPERS Disability Advisory Committee received the 2021 DAC of the Year, which is the Disability Advisory Committee of the Year Award, for the second year in a row from the Association of California State Employees with Disabilities and the State Disability Advisory Committee. The award honors the CalPERS DAC for their work to support employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities. They have accomplished that by collaborating across the organization to secure guest speakers, facilitate trainings that really help with people understanding, team member engagement, and throughout the challenges of this pandemic. A special note here is that the members of our employee resource groups, including the Disability Advisory Committee and the Diversity and Inclusion Group, are all volunteers. So congratulations to them on their meaningful work, and that work really contributes to the culture we have here at CalPERS. And now for the investment performance as of September 30th of 2021. The 1 year is 17.2, the 3 year is 10.2, the 5 year is 9.8, the 10 year is 9.5. And finally, the total fund value as of yesterday is $496 billion. And with that, I'd like to wish everyone a safe and happy Thanksgiving next week. And since this is our final board meeting of the year, I want to wish everyone a joyful holiday season, a happy, safe, and healthy new year. And that does conclude my report, President Jones. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Frost. Mr. Rufino?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Ms. Frost, for the very comprehensive report, as always. Just a quick comment, if I may, regarding our participation at COP26. First and foremost, thank you for the staff, to Ms. Simpson and other staff that participated and made our presence known. I'm not sure which table. I hear there was different levels of tables there, but nevertheless, we were at some tables, I'm sure. With that said, we've been reading all over the place, all over the media, the good, the bad, all kinds of perspective. Some will go as far as saying that, COP is a joke. It's almost useless. Some who are recognizing that the progress, even though was not what some people would have liked, but it was nevertheless good progress and good cooperation, just to barely interchange. So I would like to ask Mr. President, if not necessarily today, but at some point, I would like to hear more about our perspective, our takeaways from our perspective at the conference, and also what can we do individually as board members and collectively? Is there anything that we can do to help in these efforts? I know it's a very loaded question, but identify some actions. It will be important, I think, so at least we'll be able to see it, clearly, what direction we are going. Anyhow, if possible, I hate to impose or make requests of extra work from staff, but I think it will be helpful for us to hear from our own staff, and it will be helpful for us to know a little bit more about what happened there and, and as I say, some key takeaways. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rufino. Yeah, let that be a direction of the President to agendize that, Ms. Frost. Okay?
Good. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege and ask Ms. Frost to join me at the end of the dais. Mr. Frost, in honor of your 5 years of service to the California Public Employee Retirement System, on behalf of the entire board of CalPERS family, thank you for your many contributions and dedicated service to CalPERS, our members, and our employees. Thank you. Okay, now we will move back to the agenda. Item 6, action consent items. Do we have a motion on the action consent items? Moved by who? Mr. Fechner and second by Ms. Taylor. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the item is approved. The next item on the agenda is information consent items. I've received no request to remove anything from the consent items, so we will go to committee reports. And the first one is Investment Committee. For that, I call on the chair, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make sure. The committee approved the following agenda item 7A, baseline economic scenario, capital market assumptions for the affiliate funds for use in the 2021-22 asset liability management process. And agenda item 7B, candidate portfolio B2 with a 6.8% discount rate and utilizing 5% leverage. Does it have to be voted?
No.
Okay. The committee received the following reports on these topics. The results of the annual evaluation of the board investment consultants, highlights of current investments in California, an overview of the emerging manager program, and an update on the real assets program's compliance with the responsible contractor program policy. The chair directed the staff to review comments on Apollo management from a public commentator and consider engagement options. Bring forward a report on stranded assets and renewable energy project holdings in the portfolio and consider reporting options consistent with the current TCFD reporting. Report on the 3-year relative performance of CalPERS investments in Chinese securities. Include a 15% benchmark relative leverage limit in the upcoming revisions to the total fund policy. Provide a memo with additional context and information on the benchmarking and performance of the emerging manager program. Report on the minority and women-owned organizations CalPERS has allocated to, and forward the city report on diversity and the overall economy. The committee heard comment on the following topics: the proposed candidate portfolios, the discount rate and its effect on the employer contributions, investment policy and risk, sustainability, and gathering data on diverse managers. And at this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the March Investment Committee meeting. An overview of the plan to implement the approved strategic asset allocation and associated policy updates. Staff and the investment consultants updates on, that was weird. Staff and the investment consultants updates on market conditions and total fund performance, and an update on CalPERS governance and sustainability projects. The next meeting of the investment committee is scheduled for March 14th. March 14th, 2022 in Sacramento, California, and that is my report, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Taylor. The next item on the agenda is the Pension and Health Benefits Committee report, and for that I call on the chair, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Pension Health Benefits Committee, PHBC, met on November 16, 2021. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the following. Approve the agenda item 6A, approve the following health plan proposals for the 2023 plan year. Anthem Blue Cross benefit changes for its Medicare Advantage plan. Blue Shield of California Access Plus EPO service area expansion into 11 counties. Blue Shield of California Trio expansion into 7 counties. Blue Shield of California Trio Pharmacy Shared Savings Program. Kaiser Permanente Basic and Medicare service area expansion into Monterey County. Kaiser Permanente new Senior Advantage $0 copay plan. Kaiser Permanente Senior Advantage quarterly OTC allowance. Western Health Advantage MyCare Select HMO Medicare Advantage post-discharge meal benefit. Reproductive health equity language change. Fertility care language change. Adjustments to the hearing aids benefit. And primary care provider match for preferred provider organization members.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye. We have a request to speak on that item first. Ms. Brown.
Thank you, President Jones. I just wanted to say I will be voting no, and I agree with most of that, but some of it I don't, and we didn't split it out, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. So on the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
No.
Discussion? Seeing none, the item passes. Thank you, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you. The committee received reports on the following topics. The committee received information on the 2020 CalPERS Health Benefits Program Annual Report. The committee received public comment regarding Agenda Item 6A, approval of health benefits program proposals for the 2023 plan year, and a question on reimbursement of Medicare premiums. The chair directed staff to look at utilization of acupuncture and chiropractic services in Anthem's Medicare Preferred PPO and report back. Incorporate projected utilization of benefits into future benefit enhancement presentations where data is available. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the March PHBC meeting. The committee will approve the PHBC delegation, review health open enrollment results, and receive a report on retired members' cost of living. Mr. President, I'd like Mr. Molds to give us an update on the Kaiser strike issue while he's during the meeting. Thank you.
Sure.
No.
Not yet.
Okay, great, thanks. Still getting used to the microphones, I'm afraid. Apologies. Thank you, Mr. Committee Chair, Don Molds with the health program. So in terms of the Kaiser strike, the largest and potentially most disruptive strike was scheduled noticed, I should say, for as early as Monday. That was primarily Southern California. That was averted with a reconciliation of differences on Saturday. On early Monday morning, there was a similar reconciliation with the outstanding Northern California pharmacists. The two strikes that are outstanding, one has been ongoing for a while now. That's the facilities engineers. The other one is the National Union of Healthcare Workers, which is the union that represents behavioral health providers. They have noticed, and I would need to check to see if this has been, they're in negotiation, so, you know, it's sort of an hourly to see if anything has changed this morning. I haven't seen anything changing, but they are proposing also a sympathy strike with some of the local northern unions for Thursday. It would be a one day. I know that those negotiations were in full force yesterday. That's basically where it stands. So the vast majority of the dispute has been resolved, but there are two ongoing disputes that have not been resolved. You know, we're all hopeful that it will be minimally disruptive to our members.
Thank you for the update. Appreciate it. The next meeting of the PHBC is scheduled for March 15, 2022 in Sacramento, California. That ends my report, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fechner. Ms. Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can't let the passage of the reproductive health equity proposal go by without saying thank you to staff, thank you to my colleagues. This is a measure advancing equity and equality for members of the LGBTQ community that for those individuals who will access this benefit, this is a change of profound impact, and I am very proud to be a part of CalPERS today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Milton. Okay, the next item is the committee reports for the Finance and Administration Committee. For that, no, but she's not up yet. On Finance and Administration Committee, Mr. David Miller.
Thank you, President Jones. The Finance and Administration Committee, FAC, met on November 16th, 2021. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the following. Agenda item 5B, approve the November 2021 prospective report of solicitations, contracts, purchase orders, and letters of engagement. Agenda item 5C, approve an additional one-year contract extension for the external investment manager contracts without defined duration. Agenda item 7A, approve the draft CalPERS 2020 to 2021 basic financial statements. Agenda item 7B, approve an $8.9 million increase for a revised total authorized budget of $1.897 billion for fiscal year 2021-22. Agenda item 7C, adopt new actuarial assumptions as presented in the experience study report to be effective with the June 30th, 2021 actuarial valuations.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Discussion? Seeing none, the item passes.
The committee received reports on the following topics: semi-annual health plan financial report, pension contracts management program report, annual contract and procurement activity report. The chair directed the team to provide the committee with a breakdown on payout numbers in comparison to what is posted online, data on retirement trends, and a report on policies that affect employer costs as part of the discount rate implementation, along with a timeline. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the February Finance and Administration Committee meeting. Treasury analysis and liquidity status report, pension contracts management program report. The committee heard public comment on the following: 2020 to 2021 basic financial statements and review of PERF actuarial assumptions. The next meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee is scheduled for February 14th, 2022. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. The next item on the agenda is Performance, Compensation, and Talent Management Committee meeting, but there was no meeting, so we will move to the next item, 8E, on the agenda, which is the Risk and Audit Committee, and for that I call on the chair, Ms. Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Risk and Audit Committee met on November 16, 2021. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the following. Agenda item 6A, Independent Auditor's Report, Fiscal Year 2020-2021. Approve the CalPERS Board of Administration Independent Financial Statement Auditor's Report and the accompanying required reports for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2021. Item 6B, review of independent auditor's management letter. Approve the CalPERS Board of Administration's independent financial statement auditor's management letter for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2021.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Discussion? The item passes.
The chair directed staff to provide an update on the CalPERS internal audit number 19-001, review of death benefit overpayment receivables in mid-2022. At this time, I would like to share some of the highlights of what to expect at the February Risk and Audit Committee meeting. Review of the Risk and Audit Committee delegation, the 2021-22 Enterprise Compliance and Enterprise Risk Management Mid-Year Plan updates. The next meeting of the Risk and Audit Committee is scheduled for February 2022 in Sacramento, California.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Middleton. The next item on the agenda is 8F, Board Governance Committee, but there was no meeting, so no report. So we now move to agenda item 9, action agenda items. And for these items, we have Mr. Sharad Shah, the board's independent board counsel, on the phone. So with that, I will call on Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt the proposed decisions at agenda items 9A1 through 8 and 10 through 19 as the board's own decisions, with the minor modifications argued by staff to agenda items 9A2, 3, 11, 13, 14, 17, 18, and 19, and to remand agenda items 9A9 for the taking of additional evidence regarding, 1, whether members' inability to reinstate his former job precludes CalPERS staff from awarding an industrial disability retirement regardless of the date the member submitted his application, and 2, whether it's appropriate to apply judicial precedent decided under the judge's retirement law to eligibility determinations under the Public Employees Retirement Law without citation to proper legal authority.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Taylor. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Fechner. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion? The item passes. Ms. Taylor.
I'm also move to, we recommend the board deny both the petitions for 9A and 9B. And I move to deny I move to deny the petitions items at 9B1 and 9B2.
Moved by Ms. Taylor. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Ortega. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion? The item passes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. We will now go to information agenda items. 10A, state and federal legislation update. Mr. Brown.
Good morning, Mr. President and board members. Danny Brown, CalPERS team member. Good to see everybody in person today. This is the state and federal legislative update, and as always, I'll start with the state side. As I mentioned in September, the legislature wrapped up their work on September 10th, and then the governor had until October 10th to sign and veto bills that went to his desk. For those of you who like to keep score, there were 836 bills sent to the governor this year. He signed about 92% of them, or 770, which means he vetoed 66 bills. The volume of bills this year was on the low side of a normal legislative session, but it was still higher than last year's count of only 425 bills that made it to his desk. The CalPERS team tracked over 250 bills that dealt with retirement, health care, investments, or state administration. But don't worry, I'm only going to briefly recap 5 of those for you today. Most important was our retirement policy omnibus bill, SB 634, which was signed. The bill had 4 provisions sponsored by CalPERS. These provisions clarified and made technical changes to the optional membership enrollment process, the recovery of death benefit overpayments, the notice requirements for health benefits for a surviving spouse of a firefighter or police officer who dies in the line of duty, and the paperwork related to PERS and STRS elections. In addition, the governor signed AB 890 by Assemblymember Cervantes. As was discussed yesterday, this bill requires CalPERS and CalSTRS to provide a report to the legislature relating to emerging and diverse investment managers, with the focus on obtaining specific data on each emerging and a diverse manager participating in our program. The board adopted a support position on this bill in June. The board also supported and the governor signed AB 845 regarding COVID-related disability retirements and SB 411, which provides CalPERS flexibility in handling working after retirement violations. One of the most discussed bills for CalPERS this year was SB 278 by Senator Leyva. This bill was signed into law by the governor in late September, and I believe Anthony made some comments about it yesterday in his update. As you recall, the bill sought to provide some remedy for retirees whose pensions were reduced because a portion of their benefit was based on disallowed compensation. Under the initial version of the bill, when this occurs, the employer is responsible for paying the entire overpayment, as well as making sure that the retiree is made whole for any future pension reductions. In its final form, SB 278 will still require the employer to pay the entire overpayment owed CalPERS, but instead of being responsible for the entire amount of the future pension benefit or reduction, the employer must now only pay 20% of the present value, actual equivalent present value of the future reduction in a lump sum. Most of that money would be going to the retiree, with a small portion going to CalPERS. This change was negotiated by the author in the governor's office in the final weeks of the session. And then finally, as we move into 2022, the second year of a two-year session, there will be a number of bills that may be heard in January in their first policy committee. A couple of those bills that we already are aware of is AB 1019 by Assemblymember Holden, which is a divestment bill dealing with the Republic of Turkey and the Armenian genocide. The other bill is AB 1092 by Assemblymember Mays, which could put restrictions on CalPERS retiree health benefits if they are eligible for similar health care benefits from a subsequent employer. I doubt this bill gets much traction, but we'll closely monitor the January hearings for these bills, as well as any others that might impact us. And with that, I'll shift to the federal update. We do have K&L team with us today via the phone, but before I turn it over to Karishma and Dan, I did want to briefly mention a few activities since my last update. First, in late September, we sent comment letters to both the Financial Accounting Standards Board and to the International Accounting Standards Board, supporting their activities while asking them both to focus more on the needs of investors, especially as it relates to ESG disclosures. We also sent a letter to the House Financial Services Committee in support of draft legislation sponsored by CII that would empower share owners of multi-class stock companies and require adequate disclosures of board and workforce diversity. And then finally, we signed on to a letter along with other institutional investors that ILPA sent to the SEC, asking them to initiate rulemaking action that would mandate private fund advisors and their affiliates to regularly report all their direct and indirect fees and expenses. And with that, I will turn it over to Karishma, who will provide a brief update on what is happening in Congress before turning it over to Dan Crowley.
Mr. Brown, before we go over to federal, the bill that you mentioned about the Turkey divestment, is that the same bill that was discussed last year?
It was one of them, yes. Mr. Holden introduced the bill this current year, but it was held, or it wasn't set for hearing. He's still trying to have it heard in January. So he has as a two-year bill, it has to get through the committee in January, otherwise then it would be officially dead. But technically right now it's still alive.
I see. Okay, thank you. Just a minute, Mr. Ruffino?
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. I was going to say I can wait until the report is over, but I have a quick question, Mr. President, regarding SB 278. First and foremost, the Treasurer applauds and congratulates Senator Leyva and the entire legislature to take on this issue and for getting legislation passed that hopefully will address most of the issue with respect to this allowable compensation. But as you recall, Mr. President and members of the board, this board, we had a robust discussion about when a mistake is made, who is responsible and how to address it. And during the discussion, we talked about 278 being part of the fix, but also that 278 would not fix all the errors and all the issues. So, Mr. President, what I like to ask is, not necessarily now, but for the future, if staff could let us know, what percentage or what issues, now that we got 278 passed, addresses, and what other issues are still need to be addressed, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, that could be a written report to the board to update us on that. Thank you. Okay, proceed, Mr. Brown.
I'm just going to turn it over to Karishma. Hopefully she is on the phone. Is Karishma or Dan Crowley on the phone?
I am, Danny. Greetings to the board. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today. As Danny mentioned, I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking a bit about what is happening in Congress. And the best way I can describe it is a traffic jam, maybe a little bit of a traffic wreck, as we look to the end of this year and potentially into the first quarter of 2022. This is in part because President Biden and the congressional Democrats really saw the opportunity of this Congress as a way to really move forward with a host of priorities that not only related to the pandemic and the ongoing health and economic impact of the pandemic, but really sort of set in motion the opportunity to lock in some way some congressional Democratic priorities, acknowledging that some of them may be time limited, acknowledging that they were not going to be put in place permanently, but really that either this helps the midterm election prospects, where just by what we know from history and political physics, typically the party of the president does tend to underperform. So this may be, by really delivering on promises, this may be a way to take on some of those headwinds. Or alternatively, if there is a change in power, that it really becomes difficult to unwind policy from time to time. And so that's really been the framework for looking at this Congress. The two key objectives after the enactment of the American Rescue Plan, which occurred in the spring, were the bipartisan physical infrastructure package, and then what is being characterized as the Build Back Better package, or the human infrastructure or reconciliation package. These have been under negotiation for some time, and just on Monday, after a lot of negotiation and a lot of attempted sequencing between these two packages, the bipartisan physical infrastructure package was signed into law, again, on a bipartisan basis. And what this really does is it creates an infusion of monies to go into physical infrastructure. Physical infrastructure is broadly defined, not only to include things like roads and bridges, but broadband and a host of other ways that we're looking at infrastructure, and some, but not all, of the President's and the White House's sustainability priorities. The next big step is implementation, and we do anticipate that the departments and agencies are looking to stand up programs, in some instances use existing programs, and we expect that a significant amount of money will be flowing through the states and into localities as this money is distributed for the purposes of effectuating the law. This leaves now the the human infrastructure package, which has been under negotiation for some time. At the front end, again, a lot of the focus was on really trying to set in motion and set in place the pieces of the Democratic priorities that were really sort of critical there. And that said, it started out as a $6 trillion bill. That's what the Senate Budget Committee was looking to. This is it's chaired by Senator Bernie Sanders. By the time the Senate really took a look at the budget resolution, which defined this bill, it was a $3.5 trillion bill. And really where the Biden administration has landed is that it's a $1.75 trillion bill. So there are a host of priorities that have been aimed to be tailored that really define the key congressional priorities at this point. So what's in this bill? Issues such as Medicare expansion, ACA subsidies, Medicaid expansion, some focus on drug pricing, a focus on child care programs and education funding. issues related to climate and clean energy, and then a real focus on tax policies that support families, so issues such as CTC and the EITC. And then that is all offset with a range of tax increases, including, for instance, a 15% minimum book tax for corporations with income over $1 billion, a series of changes from an international tax perspective, and also a 5% surtax on individual income over $10 million, plus a 3% over $25 million. So a range of revenue raisers. So what's next with respect to this package? We've been waiting for scoring. The moderates have been waiting for scoring. We do anticipate that we're going to get some type of scoring this week, which means the House is likely to vote either this week or into the weekend. But that really begins a long slog on the Senate side, where there needs to be a continued negotiation, and Senators Manchin and Sinema in particular are very focused on and ensuring that the package meets their various requirements. And with the very slim majority in the House and Senate side, and particularly on the Senate side, one senator's perspective really matters. And then what is characterized as a birdbath, because this is a bill that is working under what is called a budget resolution, and is working through reconciliation. That means that all of the policies do need to have a budgetary impact. And so there will be various review procedures that occur in order to ensure that the policies can move forward. That's all to say those are the big picture items. I'm just going to touch very, very quickly on what else needs to happen before the end of the year, which is very critical. The National Defense Authorization Act, which largely deals with defense authorization and is done on a bipartisan basis on an annual basis, is also being used as a vehicle related to China competition issues, and potentially the debt limit, potentially pandemic preparedness, because it is one of the few moving vehicles that we see advancing this year. The continuing resolution to fund government, folks may recall that the funding of government runs only through December 3rd, so something needs to be done to continue to fund the government. Our expectation is that there will be a short-term continuing resolution to sometime in mid-December, and then perhaps a reconsideration early in 2022 to lock in funding for the balance of the year. And then finally, the debt limit still remains. We understand, based on some of the communications from Treasury yesterday, that the debt limit is now scheduled to run out on December 15th. Previously, Senator McConnell, the minority leader, had indicated that Republicans would not be helping with this particular effort. Yesterday indicated that there may be some openness for a bipartisan solution here. So, again, a lot to do, very little time, and very complex negotiations within the Democratic Party and across the aisle. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dan Crowley, who's going to take us through the issues that are pertinent from a regulatory perspective. Dan, over to you.
Well, thank you, Karishma. Just to build on what you said about the potential for the Build Back Better through reconciliation, one of the things that is on the table, of course, is the state and local tax deduction, which seems likely to be included if that is enacted. But Danny had asked me to focus on what's going on the regulatory side, which I will do. But before I do that, let me just mention that CalPERS remains incredibly well positioned in the current state of affairs in D.C., to the extent that the Speaker of the House is from California, the Chair of the Financial Services Committee is from California, and the Chair of the Capital Markets Subcommittee is from California. So we continue to engage with those offices on hearings relating to climate change, ESG, racial equity, and those sorts of issues, which, of course, are the topics that are most focused on in the administration. And it's across several agencies, starting with the FSOC, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, which comprises all of the federal financial regulators, led by Treasury, They have put out reports on climate risk to the system, the financial system. They're now focused on digital assets, cryptocurrencies, and in particular, central bank digital currencies. And there's a lot of both congressional oversight and regulatory activity in those areas. At the SEC, just today, they approved 2 new sets of proxy rules that are directionally supported by CalPERS. We are awaiting notices of proposed rulemaking in 3 critical areas, one of which is carbon risk disclosures, another is the human capital disclosure, and third is cyber disclosures. On the first 2, CalPERS obviously has been very active. Ann Simpson in particular on the human capital petition, and Marcy has weighed in several times on those issues. And they also, what we're waiting to see is whether that's 3 separate rule proposals or whether they bundle them together into one sort of disclosure-oriented rulemaking. It's unclear which path they will follow, but we do expect to see something before the end of the year. One of the questions is to what extent probably the biggest development to come out of COP26, which was announcement of the International Sustainability Standards Board. The question is to what extent that new framework or the TCFD will be incorporated into the SEC rulemaking. So stay tuned. We will be providing a report as soon as we see what's in the draft, and then I expect that CalPERS will want to comment. In a parallel effort, the Department of Labor has set about revisiting the Trump-era guidance on ESG, and they have put out a proposed rule to essentially move closer to where the Obama administration had been. And we've had this discussion a number of times over the years, but that was the first time in which the DOL said it is permissible for ERISA fiduciaries to consider ESG factors in making their investment decisions. It was essentially a tiebreaker. The Trump administration said it needs to be focused on pecuniary return to the fund. And what DOL has proposed is moving back to actually a standard that is not even a tiebreaker. It legitimizes taking into consideration ESG considerations consistent with a fiduciary duty, and in fact seems to impose an obligation on fiduciaries to consider that, as well as to vote for proxies. And so you see a direct parallel, again, advancing the Biden administration priorities at the SEC and the DOL and FSOC. Another issue that we've been following closely, of course, is policy developments with respect to investments in Chinese companies. There is a bill that has passed the Senate that would shorten the current delisting time frame from 3 years for failing to comply with PCAOB audit requirements down to 2 years. That bill has passed the Senate, and we expect it to be taken up and passed by the House in due course. So that's what's going on generally. We are also interested in developments. Danny mentioned the letter that CalPERS recently signed on to relating to private equity fees. And that's an area that Chairman Gensler has recently commented on, so we expect to see more in that area as well. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions about anything that Karishma and I have covered.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Ms. Taylor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
Wait a minute. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. So I got a little lost there because it got a little hard to hear you. So the SEC is adopting new proxy, or we're looking at new proxy rules. I got the carbon risk disclosures, and that's where I lost you.
I'm sorry, I've been having some technical challenges. So just today, they adopted 2 proxy rules. One of them is the universal proxy, and the other one relates to the role of proxy advisors. So that's done. We will be reviewing those and providing a report on what the takeaways are there. With respect to the SEC, we are expecting 3 rulemakings, one related to ESG disclosure, one related to human capital disclosure, and one relating to cyber risk disclosure policy.
Cyber, is that what you said?
Correct.
Disclosure, okay. And then, that's where I lost you. It was gotten hard to hear you, so I don't know if it was me or what. And then you went down a little bit further. You started talking about President Biden getting closer to the Obama rules on the environment, and then you started talking about revisiting the Trump rules. So could you kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. You will recall that during the Obama administration, DOL for the first time said that ESG can be legitimate considerations for fiduciaries in the pension context. The Trump administration came in with two targets, really, that they wanted to undo. One of them was the SEC fiduciary duty rule, and the other one was the DOL guidance on ESG. And they essentially said that the only way fiduciaries can consider ESG is if it impacts pecuniary returns to the fund, which is a term of art they came up with. Now the Biden DOL has put out a new proposed rule that essentially reverts closer to where the Obama administration was, but goes a little further because, of course, things have changed over time. ESG is now mainstream in terms of portfolio theory, where it's almost to the point where if you're not considering ESG, then you're probably abdicating your responsibility as a fiduciary. And that sentiment is captured in the proposed rule pretty well. It's out for comment. Comments are due on December 12th, or December 13th, rather. And I know from conversation with Danny that CalPERS plans to submit comment.
Great. I appreciate that. Yeah, I needed some clarification on that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Taylor. Yeah, Dan, my question goes to your comments regarding SALT. And since California is one of the states that would be probably most significantly impacted, my question is, the discussions that are occurring, is it returning to the original status, or it's a modification and not completely returning to the situation prior to SALT?
I will have to defer to Karishma, who, in addition to being the practice group coordinator, also heads up our tax policy team. But I will tell you that as of right now, the idea is to cap the SALT deduction at $80,000. But Karishma may have more insight.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And just building on Dan's point, under the current proposal that is being considered, the House Democrats are pushing a plan that would temporarily raise the cap to $80,000. Now, that has been somewhat controversial. That some of the scoring has shown that could result, along with sort of the configuration of the other parts of the reconciliation bill, in a positive for what are being characterized as higher income or wealthier individuals and families. We understand yesterday that Senate Budget Chairman Bernie Sanders said that he's working on a variation of that proposal that would basically adjust that so that it would make it an unlimited tax deduction, but then would make it available for individuals under some income threshold. So that's, I think, still very much in the mix, and I think we're going to get a better sense of what that looks like once we have some additional scoring this week and once the bill moves over to the Senate side.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I see no additional requests to speak from board members, so,
Good morning, Danny. Thank you for the presentation. I'm not sure if it fits federal or state, but because it's both. There was some press about the Department of Transportation holding back some transportation money because of the PEPRA, and there was an exclusion in federal law for transportation workers. Can you give us an update of what you think will happen with that dispute? And whether, I guess it doesn't impact us, but PEPRA governance sort of does fit under oversight, I guess? Thank you.
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm not sure if Dan or Karishma have had a chance to get up to speed on this issue with the transit. I mean, just from my conversations with some of the people at the legislature, I would not be surprised that legislation gets introduced to try to free up this transit money by rolling back PEPRA for these transit workers. What that will look like or whether or not that'll get accomplished, it's unclear. I mean, the last time a bill was introduced was in 2019. So I would imagine, at least from the state legislature, we should see legislation. As far as what might happen at the federal level or between the governor's administration and DOL, I don't have any insight on that right now.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. Ms. Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to thank you, Danny, and KKL for staying on top of stuff, and especially at the federal level, where we actually have some chances to do some really good work with our ESG and our strategy, right? So this is our part of the governing strategy, so that we can change some rules and help move along ESG. So I want to thank everybody for working on that.
Thank you. Thank you, and it's definitely a group effort between my team and Ann Simpson's teams. Keeping track of all this that's going on.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ruffino?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick follow-up on Mr. Rubalcaba question. Is the employer contracted with CalPERS on that particular transit employer? Is he? Are there CalPERS?
There are several transit districts that contract with CalPERS. Not all of them do, but I think in the 30s, there's probably 35, 36 transit districts that are in our plan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I see no additional questions. Thank you. Okay, now we will move on to agenda item 10B, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Framework Update. Ms. Timberlake D. Adamo.
Where's my mic? Oh, it's on. Never mind. Good morning, board members, members of the public. Marlene Timberlake Diadamo, CalPERS team member. It is my great pleasure to be back in this chair in front of you discussing the very important diversity, equity, and inclusion work we have undertaken. This presentation is structured in 3 parts. First, a brief reintroduction to our DEI framework, including its foundation, structure, and philosophy. Second, an update of what we've been up to since our last conversation, when the framework was introduced. And third, with the insights we've gained already, a discussion of next steps for each of the identified framework themes and topics. As we move through the presentation, I am happy at the conclusion of each section to take questions, or if the board members prefer, I will move through the presentation and take questions at the conclusion. Next slide, please. The framework contemplates an iterative process. As we learn from the initiatives, we will improve and refine our expectations. We will also use these experiences to develop measures and create benchmarks and monitor impacts. At the outset, I would like to recognize the many individuals who have leaned in, really with 2 feet in this endeavor. The workstream teams, human resources, OSSD, the health team, the investment office, and board governance and sustainability, the diversity outreach program, our diversity advisory council, and our employee resource groups, which were mentioned previously, our senior leadership council, the executive team, and our CEO. Plus, I thank you to the many team members who have contacted me with ideas, suggestions, and offers of assistance as we develop this very important work. I wanted to start this presentation with a brief discussion of the philosophy that underpins the development of the framework. At bottom, the philosophy of our framework is foundational. This indicates that this framework builds on the foundations that we as an organization have established. In addition to the existing concepts and foundational activities, we are embarking on several organization-wide activities, like unconscious bias training, that level set the understanding of these topics for our team members, stakeholders, and vendors. Our philosophy is that this framework will serve as the centralized roadmap for our activities related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The framework is really the beginning. It is our stake in the ground regarding our plan and the priorities we have initially set. This is not a check-the-box exercise. This is an iterative process and will be refined and tightened as we see the results. I think of this document and our framework as a living document. It is put forward so that we can be held accountable for the commitments we make, and you can see where we are going. The third element of our philosophy is that our framework should be aggressively inclusive. We believe that in order for this framework to be successful, we need to own it, all of us. The success of our framework depends on a deep commitment to our goals, and there is no better way to ensure the full implementation of our framework than with a strong and steady march towards inclusivity. I know that the only way to get and keep participation of the many groups impacted by this framework is to include them in a meaningful way. Those of you who know us well know that we ascribe to sets of beliefs that frame, to a large extent, the way we think about our work, how we operate to achieve those results, and provide a basic grounding or North Star for achievement of our mission and as an expression of our values. What I'm talking about is bullet number 2, beliefs, principles, data, and research. Our framework consists of 5 priority areas, sometimes called categories or themes. Still working on how to describe them. But these categories were selected based on the intersection of our mission and values. Our mission is to pay pension and health benefits to members and their beneficiaries. The 5 priority themes are culture, talent, health equity, investments, and supplier diversity. CalPERS also has 6 core values: quality, accountability, respect, integrity, openness, and balance. The way we would like the framework to be understood is that we have selected 5 areas within which we believe we could make a difference. Goals have been set for each priority area, with objectives identified that we think will contribute to the completion of the goals. Each objective has several initiatives identified, which are meant to further the identified objectives. Next slide, please. This is an area that we've spent some time on since our original rollout of the framework. Governance is important. We believe in good governance, whether it is across enterprises or within teams. Good governance to us looks like both a bottoms-up and a top-down approach. Slide 5 actually illustrates this thought, but before we get to that, let me comment a bit on our approach. The work, while managed throughout the organization, primarily through the activities of the 5 work streams, occurs at the program levels. It is also centralized through the role of the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, who has the responsibility to facilitate and be a change agent for the completion of this work through the enterprise. One of the things that you've heard, I think, a familiar theme throughout this meeting, today's meeting and yesterday's meetings in other committees, is the deep collaboration that the teams have. And you've heard mentioned throughout the meetings work that's being done in the program areas as a way to show that we are all connected in this effort. As the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer oversees and aligns all the activities, the 6 core functional program areas within the enterprise are critical and are primary to the identification and completion of workstream initiatives. Each of these program areas contribute to the framework initiatives and have deep roles in framework completion. At this point, I would like to talk about the real partnership that occurs under the framework. The framework is a true collaboration. Every aspect of the creation and development and management of the framework involves participation by every program area. The program areas have collaborated with me on every aspect of the framework, development of goals, objectives, and initiatives. And I'll note that Ann Simpson told me I taught her what a quarterback means. I'm trying to find my place, sorry. So some of the things that we've worked on is the development of the goals, objectives, initiatives. The program areas are crucial to determining how to measure our efforts. What does success look like, and how should it be measured? What is practical? What is going to be a game changer in terms of impact? How do we know that what we are doing is making a difference? And how do we do so in an environment as transparent as this one? So the past few months, we've been working on initiatives and understanding what the measure and what we think success looks like. Now, mind you, I said this in March, and I'll say it again. We do not hold any belief that these activities are of a check-the-box nature. What we are talking about is transformation. Transformation of the kind that we are used to, but can be hard nonetheless. And as previously stated by me and others related to this topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the development and refinement of the framework is iterative. Data in this area can be a bit vexing, as you've heard throughout these meetings regarding other topics. And so a significant part of the accompanying work related to the framework is how to collect, interpret, and use the data in furtherance of the completion of the framework. We expect this process to take some time. So these 6 areas are our starting point. We work collaboratively to identify the initiatives, determine how to measure success, and how often to measure and report on our progress. Next slide, please. An important partner and collaborative group is our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Council. The council has representatives from all over the organization. And as Marcy mentioned in her opening, the membership is voluntary. The perspective of this council serves as a clearinghouse for DEI activities throughout the organization. Our employee resource groups report their activities through a subcommittee process, and this ensures that there is an awareness at all levels and across the organization. Membership in the ERGs are voluntary, and these groups really serve as the eyes and ears of the organization. CDIG and CDAC, by the way, it's a committee, not a council, as mentioned earlier, have joint monthly meetings, rotating between the two each month in terms of programming, which is fantastic, by the way. The D&I Steering Committee within the Investment Office is, again, a voluntary group whose focus is to engage with each other to acknowledge and address issues surrounding D&I within the Investment Office. Looking at the second bullet, larger bullet. The left hand has to know what the right hand is doing. A point about this type of work is that collaboration and cooperation is a must, and that's probably something you'll hear from me a lot, and we really do believe it. We acknowledge that we will be unable to be successful if there is not open communication regarding the strategy and the efforts needed to achieve our desired results. Since this is only the second time we've reviewed the framework, we will get into a regular reporting cadence regarding our activities. We are proposing scheduled updates to you twice per year. First, with the annual Commitment to Diversity report, and second, with an update on framework progress. We're thinking likely in September. Next slide, please. Here we have visualized the interactions between the program areas and highlighted the program areas that have work stream responsibilities. Starting on the left-hand side, we have listed my role with the Advisory Council and ERGs rolled up to show that these entities occupy a role and serve in a primary engagement function with our team members. With different objectives, each program area will be aligning their activities toward completion of the framework. This slide reflects the general responsibilities of the program areas as they relate to the framework. The 5 branches to the right signify the work that is currently being done through the work streams. more specifically the initiatives that have been identified as those to help move the needle towards meeting our stated objectives and achieving progress on the overall goals. CalPERS has two ERGs, the Diversity Inclusion Group and the Diversity Awareness Committee. Each of these groups has voluntary memberships, as stated before, that have been steadily increasing each year. The groups provide topical programming and serve as a sounding board for various conversations and engagement with the CalPERS team members. This year, as Marcy mentioned, our CalPERS Diversity Awareness Committee received the distinction of being selected DAC of the Year by the state. Next slide, please. So with this slide begins sort of the second section of this presentation. So I'm happy to take questions or to move through as the committee or the board prefers.
Okay, I don't see any questions from other board members, but I have one.
Sure.
Sorry. You mentioned that the participation in all these efforts is it's voluntary. How do you get to those folks who don't step up and wish to be part of this process?
So we do a lot of communicating and a lot of advertising in terms of our meetings. The meetings are once a month and they're out in advance. We encourage folks to attend the meetings. We have, like I said, the attendance at the meetings has been steadily increasing, and a lot of it really occurs from people who participate and really found a great benefit to the activities and the discussions and the actions. So it's voluntary, it's not mandatory, but we really do see a lot of participation with respect to the topics that we have.
Okay. And another question is that some information I've read, it talks about that it can't just start at the bottom and go up, and it can't just start at the top and go down. So you need from the bottom up and also the top down. How are the executives involved in these processes?
So in terms of, I would say that the executives from Marcy and myself and my peers on the executive team have a great amount of involvement. I actually work very closely with each of them on these issues. 4 of us are actually part of the disadvisory, I'm trying to think of the acronym, the Advisory Council. So that's the big governance group around DEI activities. And we talk about DEI issues and have conversations frequently. In fact, we've had a lot of conversation recently around the session, which I'll go into, that we had an uncomfortable conversation session that was organization-wide, and had lots of conversation with the executive team about helping to encourage team members to attend those sessions.
Okay, thank you.
I would say that I'm fully supported by the executive team in these endeavors.
Thank you.
Okay, slide 6. Let's put my glasses on. The accomplishments listed here revolve around team member experiences and engagement. Recently, we concluded the second session in a series of 3 on unconscious bias. The second set of sessions was titled Uncomfortable Conversations. We had our engaged consultant take the enterprise through a discussion of microaggressions. What are they? How to recognize and address someone when offense has been either delivered or received. The culmination of this session was on how we have uncomfortable conversations. This was a practical discussion regarding how to set up for uncomfortable conversations so that, most importantly, these conversations can be productive. As I've mentioned previously, our ERGs are very active. A short list of activities include team discussions during Pride Month, recognition of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and a really terrific discussion regarding strategies for improving accessibility for deaf and blind team members. These discussions were hosted by individuals who were part of these communities and provided a rich discussion amongst team members regarding how to be better allies for members in these communities, including the proper terminology and preferences. I learned a lot myself about this. We've also created a dedicated DEI community on Yammer. Yammer is the intranet community for CalPERS team members to engage with one another. And so the real push around here is around communication and engagement. And you know, you referred, Mr. Jones, to sort of the bottom up and the top down. So we're starting at both levels because we can't, you know, we don't feel like there's one approach. You really have to start in a lot of different places. And as we move through the conversation, I'll talk a little bit about what we view as individuals' journeys. But the bottoms-up part is really engaging people at the individual level and asking about the things that are basic to them, as well as from a governance perspective going top-down and showing individuals that this is important to us and that this is something that we have invested in. Next slide, please. Additional activities on the culture side include daily acknowledgments of observances titled Today We Celebrate. This is a way for us as an organization to acknowledge and recognize the many contributions of individuals and cultures to our society. These daily acknowledgments are important to our team members and are appreciated as recognition by CalPERS to the richness that they contribute to our culture. Second bullet, we participated in outreach efforts to entities within Sacramento. For instance, we've had local nonprofit organizations provide insight on relevant matters. And just a third plug about the DAC of the year, that's the third bullet. We're very proud of that, and we're very proud of our Disability Awareness Committee. Slide 8, please. Moving to talent management. We recognize that engagement with our talent constitutes some of the most significant activities we can do to help propel our framework. To that end, our Human Resources Division is working extremely hard to usher in the type of positive change we think will have an impact on our culture. Our approach for talent is to look for improvements during the employee life cycle. I believe that the employee life cycle begins even before the employee is hired. And they do too, we believe that. It begins with the creation of the position and/or the use of the recruitment materials, the recruitment process itself, the development of team members during their employment, the retention of these team members as they move through the employee life cycle, succession planning, and even the conclusion of the employee relationship. Through exit interviews, I've found that some of the most important feedback can come from employees whose motivations is the betterment of the organization. This framework and the initiatives identified recognize that the recruitment process begins with the creation of the roles and the development of the materials. Therefore, some of the first actions we've taken to ensure that we've incorporated diversity, equity, and inclusion language in our recruitment materials includes making sure that we've had that commitment to DEI in our materials, and we've added links to the CalPERS D&I related intranet pages. This recognition assures potential candidates of our intent to ensure that these concepts are weaved into our processes to assure candidates of the culture that we wish to have. For recruitment, we have tested an augmented writing tool which reviews recruitment materials for inclusionary language. It essentially gives the materials a score and gives us options to make the language more inclusionary. Dedication to inclusionary language within recruitment materials helps ensure that our recruitment efforts appeal to the widest audience possible. A great attempt to make sure that as an employer, we are able to access a wide pool of candidates. Additionally, in terms of the recruitment process, we are testing redaction software that neutralizes personal information in resumes and state applications, which equalizes the review of candidate information. This is an attempt to remove the potential occurrences of unconscious bias in the recruitment process. In August, CalPERS hosted a first-ever event titled Pathways for Women. This was an event with a day of programming developed by and for CalPERS women regarding a myriad of issues related to the way women move through their professional lives. This event included special interviews of CalPERS women in leadership regarding the paths they took and advice for women growing in their careers. There were several conversations with women business leaders in the Sacramento region and women in leadership roles of other important organizations. It was a truly inspiring event that lifted the spirits and expectations of those in attendance. While it was the first event of its kind by CalPERS, it will not be the last. The last bullet refers to work on establishing baseline DEI metrics for use in comparing CalPERS workforce data, determining what is the best group to compare our workforce against, and measuring our own demographics. For instance, the demographics of other pension funds, the Greater Sacramento region, CalHR state workforce, state of California, and active and retired memberships are all under consideration. Something that becomes fairly evident rather quickly is the need for data. By now, you've heard the familiar lament regarding data, how hard it is to aggregate and to synthesize across this organization and others. The ability to aggregate and interpret data allows us to measure results and determine what constitutes success. Data allows us to compare our experiences against peers and gives us a basis upon which to determine if our efforts are yielding results. We intend to make data an important component of this framework. We understand that data can tell our story in a meaningful way. And as our efforts develop, you will see our story unfold through the data. Next slide, please. Here we're moving to talk about the health information. And as you all heard yesterday from Don and Dr. Logan, there's a lot of efforts underfoot, a lot of good work underfoot in this area. The first bullet refers to the health demographic profiles, which is an effort to understand demographic information for members in order to use that information to evaluate disparities in health outcomes among CalPERS members and develop programs to improve disparities in partnership with our health plans. Really important work. The next bullet refers to the health equity plan requirements for 2022. Here, this specified the multicultural health standards and certification and race and ethnicity reporting requirements. The reporting requirements requires health plans to report demographic health data by race and ethnicity, and the multicultural health standards provides services in different languages and different races as an attempt to help members access services in a way that they're, I talk a lot about sort of meeting people where they are, and in this instance, it's an opportunity to meet people where they are with assistance and services that help them get what they are looking for. For the third bullet, as described by Dr. Logan yesterday, proposed health benefit changes for 2023, the infertility benefit definition, and the reproductive health equity language updates, 2 items that we too are very proud of. And the last bullet is the participation in the DMHC, Department of Managed Healthcare, Health Equity and Quality Committee. The committee is currently in development, and it will be tasked with providing initial recommendations for standard health equity and quality measures, including annual benchmark standards for assessing equity and quality in California health plans. Next slide, please. Supplier diversity. Here we have increased participation in our supplier survey data to better understand demographics, updated vendor responsibility language, transition to online surveys, requested vendors participate annually. All of this is meant to get us closer to our goal of understanding the demographics of our vendors, as well as helping them to do business with us. continuing to participate in statewide DVBE meetings, and returning to in-person trade shows are other items that we think will help with these initiatives and the overall objectives. Next slide, please. Our framework is built on a recognition that inclusive practices and diverse environments, including workforces, helps organizations perform better. In addition to the benefits that accrue from a diverse workforce, we have long acted upon our beliefs regarding the need for governance and sustainable investments, including human capital management measures, which will help ensure that we are able to fulfill our mission through our investments to pay benefits to nearly 2 million members and beneficiaries for decades in the future. And that is something that we take very seriously. To that end, we believe that it is our duty to ensure that we do everything possible to ensure that our fund will be able to pay those benefits. We believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of its manifestations is required to ensure our ability to pay benefits. As mentioned, our Sustainable Investments Program has a four-pronged approach towards addressing the many concerns and approaches regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. The four-pronged approach includes advocacy, agent, engagement, integration, and through partnerships. Activities that have occurred since our last meeting include the Diversity Forum, which we co-hosted. And then on the advocacy side, these were also mentioned by Mr. Brown in the legislative update, testimony. We testified before the House of Representatives on climate change and social responsibility, and testimony before the House of Representatives in a hearing titled By the Numbers, How Diversity Data Can Measure Commitment to Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Next slide. Comment letters. Again, also mentioned previously, International Accounting Standard Board, Financial Accounting Standard Board, HR 1277 advocating human capital management and diversity, and House Financial Services Committee regarding required annual diversity disclosures of public companies. On the engagement side, we voted against 197 directors at companies where our diversity engagements did not result in constructive outcomes. And we ran director vote no campaigns requesting other shareholders to vote against directors for being non-responsive to CalPERS diversity engagements. Next slide, please. Here, we have supported diversity related to shareholder proposals on median gender and racial pay equity and D&I reporting. We ran proxy solicitations on some diversity proposals and participated on the National Association of Security Professionals legislative panel. The Lenox Park contract was fully executed, as mentioned yesterday, and we initiated Series 3, focused on climate change and human capital, with an effort and emphasis on emerging and diverse managers and human capital management. Next slide, please. So this concludes the part of the presentation regarding the accomplishments. So I'll stop and see if anyone has any questions.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Sorry about that. This is great, Marlene. Thank you very much for all this work. This is a lot of work that you've gotten done. So I had a question you talked about. Let me go back and find it real quick. There it is. Identify additional workforce metrics to be established in 1 year. So that's CalPERS doing that?
Yes.
Or CalPERS?
Yes.
Do you have an idea of how you're going to do that, how you're going to integrate that in?
So we're working really closely with our HR team partners, and we understand that, you know, we get the data and we address the data, and we look for ways to compare our metrics to peer groups that we've established or that we're looking to establish. So right now we're really talking about what are the best peer groups. You know, the way that we all, and I particularly am looking at the approach and the data is to understand sort of where you're at first and then figure out what you need to do in order to get to where you want to go. So a lot of the efforts that we're doing right now is in that understanding where we're at. So the year one metrics is really looking at, the stuff that we already do. We already report information, but it's really about making sure that we can use that information in a way that allows us to measure what success looks like moving forward.
So part of the problem with that, I think, is self-identification on a lot of this, right?
You got it, yes.
How do we encourage that?
So I don't know that I would say maybe it is part of the problem, but I try not to talk in terms of problems, but that is part of what we're looking to do, is to understand the data and how it comes in, and then figuring out where we go from there using the data that we have. I'm a big proponent of trying to use what we have as opposed to trying to recreate the wheel. And to what I think you were going to say is a lot of this may will probably include efforts at communication with individuals. And, it really is sort of a multi-pronged approach. I can't state enough the fact that we can't just do one thing. I mean, if this could be accomplished by one thing, everyone would do it. And so what we really are looking to do is to understand our organization, our culture, and then what we need to do in order to move our culture forward. And it's not going to be the same for every organization. I've talked to lots of organizations, and there's lots of different approaches out there. But the thing that we're doing is we're focused on our mission, we're focused on what we need to do and where we'd like to be, and we're figuring out how we're going to get there. And again, I've mentioned, it's probably the fourth time I've mentioned, this is going to be an iterative process. But it's important for us, I think, too, and we're not afraid, thanks to Marcy, to really look at the progress and determine where we want to be and how we're going to get there, and pivot if we need to. Part of this is not that, no one is saying we have all the answers. What we're saying is, here's what we'd like to do, here's what we see, and we're going to move in that direction. And we're going to make changes as we need to.
So I appreciate that. I'm wondering, it's talking about our story, I think, right? To get people to cooperate. And I'm a state worker, so I know the fear of telling management things you don't want them to know, right? So I don't know how you alleviate that fear. Maybe that's a constant communication about that, recognition awards, that kind of thing. I don't know what your process is going to be, but I think there's lots of different ways to do it. And maybe you're talking about, you're looking and speaking with other peers, whether that's state agencies or private industry, I don't know, but some of the civil rights organizations might be helpful. I'm sure you've contacted them. And then in addition, you had also said, and I do appreciate this work because I know how hard this is, you talked about establishing peer groups. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? Or is that something you don't want to talk about right at the moment?
Well, I would say that there's the one thing about this area is there is no shortage of information that's out there. And I have been plugged into lots of organizations, whether it's diversity, equity, and inclusion officers throughout industries, specific industries, or thinking about working with other groups in terms, it's really about gaining knowledge and understanding best practices. And so when I talk about peer groups, particularly in the context of the workforce metrics, it really was about understanding how to benchmark our work and our progress with like organizations, because you don't want to do an apples to oranges comparison. And mentioning being a state worker also means that there's certain things that are unique to our organization and our environment that maybe don't exist in other private sector or other types of industries.
Exactly.
So it's really about understanding how not to measure apples versus oranges, because I think that's a surefire way to not have success. And so we're really taking an approach of making sure that the work that we're targeting to do is going to be the type of work that we think in our environment will yield the type of results that we're looking at.
Great, I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't need any revelation of who these peer groups are. I just want to make sure that we're using them to our best ability and the right ones, right?
Correct.
So that's where, how do we know even that we've got the right ones? But other state agencies, other, government entities, that kind of thing, I think would be a great idea. And I'm just flying off what I'm just thinking right now.
If I could go back to one question that you asked that you probably didn't expect me to have an answer to, or maybe not right now, is, I really ground this work, particularly as it relates to our talent opportunities and our engagement, in trust. And it might seem a little bit sort of Pollyannish, perhaps, to say that trust is important, but it really is. And I don't think that we can have any progress in this effort without team members and stakeholders and board members and others really trusting the work that we're doing and trusting that the efforts that we're making are for the betterment of everyone. And so I've had lots of conversations with folks who maybe aren't comfortable saying things publicly, but they can come to me and say things to me privately. Or, for me, it's just important for people to say what their perspectives are and say what's on their mind. We can't get to a common place if people withhold, what they're thinking about or what their intentions are. So, again, for me, it really does come down to trust. And, you're not going to get everybody on board, but, and that's why sort of in the foundation, I talk about being aggressively inclusive, because I think being aggressively inclusive in our framework really shows those who might be reluctant or hesitant at first to sort of dip their toe into the water and come into the pool with us and see that, it's going to be just fine.
And I appreciate that. And you know what? If myself as a board member / state worker can help encourage folks, or any of us, let us know what we can do to help.
Yes, thank you. Labor partners as well.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, thank you for this. I just can't tell you how exciting and encouraging this is, and what a contrast it is to some of the organizations I've seen and been involved in over the years. And what I'm curious about is with some of these, like the forums and the pathways for women, have we been able to capture some of that for folks who didn't go? Are some of those sessions recorded? Is it available that it can be shared? Because I think that would be really helpful for folks, even in other organizations and stakeholders, et cetera, to be able to see and learn from and perhaps model themselves.
Yes, we've recorded it. And I think I'll talk to Brad about, I'm sure he's hearing, what we can do in terms of getting that information out to a larger audience.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Rufino?
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Adamo. This is, just as other members have said, really exciting work and really great accomplishment, a great start. I have a quick question regarding your proxy voting, and I noted, as you indicated in your slide, that you voted against 197 directors and the vote no campaigns. And so recently our office had received, for example, many emails, some that were like in a chain, about expressing or wanting the treasurer to vote against a particular incumbent director and so on and so forth. My understanding is that the proxy process, that voting is delegated, the board delegates that to staff, and then ultimately staff makes those decisions. Whether that's accurate or not, but that's my understanding, Mr. President, that we have a policy and they follow that particular policy. My question is that policy at this juncture, does it need to be revised? Does it need to be looked at? Does it give you flexibility and it gives you plenty room for you to operate from, number one? And secondly, Mr. President, it may be helpful, I'm not sure if it's just our office, but it may be helpful during an education time to go over again the proxy voting and how that, that whole process, how that works. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks.
President Jones, we do have a proxy agenda item where we come in and share what our focus area is, as well as the results from proxy season. So we have that on the agenda, but we can add the policies around that item.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
Oh,
So
sorry.
done. Okay. Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Marlene, for the presentation and the great work that you guys have been doing so far. What I would like to see, since we are a leader in so many areas in the industry, as you feel more comfortable, as you fine-tune this and get it into a manageable place that you feel comfortable with, I'd like to find an opportunity, as like Mr. Miller said, to be able to share this information via outline form, et cetera, with other groups like NACD, ICGN, et cetera. As I had our conferences and things and talk, people are always looking for something like this. And I think if we're able to establish something in a program like this, we'd be able to share with others, I think it'd be a phenomenal outreach.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, that's excellent comment, Rob, because I attended in September at AIM conference, and Marlene and Marcy was there, and they just jumped all over Marlene. What are you doing? They want to know. They were searching for information, so that's an excellent comment.
Yes,
Okay.
and I have spoken to a couple of organizations as well regarding our framework. It's a lot of sharing of information and ideas.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the questions here.
All right, slide 14, culture, next steps. So over the next 7 slides, I will preview the efforts that we have identified under each of the elements to continue to bring us closer to meet our objectives and goals. First, on culture. We continue to build awareness of the DEI framework within the enterprise. With that awareness comes engagement with our team and a greater understanding by them and participation from them in our overall efforts to improve our culture. Centralizing communications through my role. This is a way to continue to focus and centralize the DEI efforts across the organization. And it's worth noting that this is really a team effort throughout the organization, and the real effort here is to show that collaboration and that communication occurs, and that it is critically important that it does. And so I am sort of the front-facing person, if you will, but as you all know, in this organization, there's a lot of folks that are working also, and so they all deserve credit, and they're, like I said, jumped in with 2 feet on these efforts. Third bullet, so building out designated trainings. Access to information, including designated training opportunities and resources, is a great way for us to enable our team members to pursue their DEI journeys individually and as part of the larger CalPERS environment. And this is really what I spoke to earlier about not being one way. It's sort of top down and bottom up, and really intervening at many different levels throughout the enterprise. And so the designated trainings is an area that we think is a really great one for folks to engage individually and to do so at their pace and at their comfort level. Outreach efforts to team members, including an Idea Factory challenge around belonging. And this asks team members to tell us what makes them feel like they belong at CalPERS, and to provide us with some suggestions on activities around belonging for team members. This Idea Factory challenge actually runs through March, and so we're looking forward to getting the responses. Next slide, please. So these are some of the initiatives that we are currently pursuing and are applicable to our talent. Again, mentioned the inclusive language and application redaction tools, education opportunities around DEI recruitment practices for team leaders, and one of my personal favorites, the DEI certificate program. This is born from a recognition that every person undertakes their DEI journey, that's how I refer to it, from a different starting point. So many people have expressed an interest in educating themselves on this topic and are genuinely interested in participating in our organizational journey. To further these efforts and to assist team members with the mechanics of getting started, we will be creating a DEI certificate program designed to help individuals learn about this topic at their pace and in an environment where they feel most comfortable. Ultimately, they will be better equipped to communicate, resolve conflicts, solve problems, reduce bias, and perform at the highest levels in our culturally diverse setting. Next slide, please. Here, we are focusing on the piloting of onboarding approach, which increases mandatory training compliance in the first 30 days. This includes mandatory harassment prevention and other compliance-based DEI trainings. Next slide, please. Regarding our health equity element, use the CBEEs, the CalPERS Benefits Education Events, to publicize and raise awareness of the efforts to increase the number of demographic profiles in the system. This is continuing the efforts around collecting the health data profiles. We'll continue to push for the importance of health demographic profiles, and the benefits of this work cannot be understated, as it can have significant and lasting impacts for members. The formation of the Health Equity Advisory Council. This is an external group of subject matter experts that guide the health branch and/or CalPERS with developing and implementing strategies to advance health equity. It brings valuable perspectives and experiences with mitigating health inequities in healthcare settings. Next slide, please. Our strategic goal related to supplier diversity is to have a high-performing supplier diversity program where objectives is to better understand our supplier community through DEI lenses. We believe that this can be accomplished by improving our supplier relationships, and activities that are underway include increasing our outreach efforts to promote state procurement opportunities to interested suppliers, assisting suppliers in becoming certified small business and/or DVBEs, and understanding the demographic information of our suppliers. This helps us understand the data. It starts with completion of the annual survey. It's voluntary, and we will be leveraging the expanded outreach to improve our demographic understanding of our suppliers. Next slide, please. On investments. Oops. Sorry. Engagement. Continue efforts around engagement with companies on board diversity, use proxy voting, and share owner proposals for change. Continue to partner with other asset owners on the California Board Diversity Initiative to improve board diversity among historically underrepresented groups in the S&P 500. Next slide, please. Staying on investments, moving to advocacy. Respond to the SEC's human capital consultation promoting enhanced human capital reporting. Respond to the SEC's climate proposal. Continue to raise the issue of environmental racism, and support racial equity audits during proxy season. Next slide, please. So this is the last slide in my presentation, and this really informs you that we expect to have the update of the diversity report in February, and that we'll be back with an update with framework activities after that. So again, getting into that cadence of twice a year. So with that, I will open up the conversation for additional questions.
Okay, thank you, Marlene, again, for a very comprehensive update. Appreciate that. Mr. Ruffino, are you still in the queue, or was that a previous? Okay. Ms. Middleton.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. And Marlene, thank you. I join with everyone else in really appreciating the depth and the quality of the work that you're doing here. Wanted to make a comment on two areas. One on health equity. In, I believe, the meeting over the summer, we heard in public comment from a young gay man in Shasta County who described calling numerous physicians asking if they would be comfortable having a gay man as a patient, and was told consistently no. Issues around access to health care for not just members of the LGBTQ community, but both racially and ethnically, is something that is oftentimes hidden. And I think we owe it to our membership to find out to what extent are there barriers to access to health care that exist in places where it would appear that there are robust networks, but in fact having physicians within the network who are culturally competent and welcoming is an issue. Second area on investments and the actions that we've been taking, and I'm really proud that CalPERS has adopted LGBTQ inclusion as a part of our outreach efforts for boards. What we frequently find, though, is that there are no metrics associated with LGBTQ membership on corporate boards, and until we get the metrics, we will never get the results. So I think it's really important for us to, in our efforts, to double down on calls for inclusive metrics as we move forward. And thank you.
Thank you. I agreed. We've talked a lot about the fact that data, whether it's the first example with inclusiveness among the providers, or the second example around identifying metrics for boards, it really comes down to the data. And, I'm really proud to say that, all of us understand that and are working really hard to make sure that we have what we need in order to make the difference that we think we're able to make.
Thank you, and please do not be bashful in asking the board for help when we can be helpful.
Absolutely.
Ms. Paquin?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the report. It was very comprehensive and very exciting to see all the work that CalPERS has been doing so far pulled into one place and then providing a framework to move forward. I was just curious, glad to see that CalPERS will be part of the Health Equity Committee that the Department of Managed Care is setting up. And are there other areas to work with the state on these issues, such as diversity of suppliers or some of the other initiatives?
I'm sure there are. Yes. I'm sure there's one of the things that I've been doing is getting plugged in and engaged with different entities around the state. There's actually some statewide organizations that have regular meetings that I also participate in. So I would say the answer to your question is yes. There are definitely opportunities to engage with organizations within the state on the efforts that we're doing and to learn from their experience as well as share ours.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks again. No further questions from board members, so we now move to item 10C on the agenda, summary of board direction. Ms. Frost.
Thank you, President Jones. I did note 3 follow-up items. So the first one is an agenda item on our experience and perspective from COP26. Likely we would do this as a part of the January board education program, where we'll be providing full update on the activities to managing climate risk in the portfolio. 2 is to provide the board with a written report on SB 278, the impacts on correction of errors and any other type of errors that may not be addressed through that legislation. And then 3 was to find opportunities to share the CalPERS DEI framework with outside organizations such as NACD and ICGN.
Very good. That's fine. Thank you very much. So that now brings us to the last agenda item, public comment, and Mr. Fox, I think we have one, at least, I don't know, maybe more persons on the phone that have requested to speak.
Yes, Mr. President, we have 2 callers. The first caller is Mr. Wissam Altawaji.
Hello?
Hello?
Am I on?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Good morning. Appreciate the opportunity. Today, I would like to talk about Medicare rates on the market versus Medicare rate with the CalPERS. Based on my research for the last several months and talking to some of the people that have no knowledge of the market rates from CalPERS team, the rates on the market is between zero for medical advantage plan and about $150, $160 for the Medicare supplement plan. And for the prescription plan is about between $0 and $60, $70. So even if you take it specifically for the PERS Platinum and Gold, they are between $360 or $377 and $381 versus what's available on the market. It's in the range of $200, $220. I don't understand this discrepancy. I contacted the staff. They weren't aware of the market people. I tried to contact Miss Green, and I sent her several emails, over 10, 15 emails, and she didn't reply. And I'm really perturbed by this non-reply and ignoring my emails. And I'm trying to help her and help me understand what's going on, but nothing is coming from her side. I would like the board to insist on her or somebody more knowledgeable to call me and explain to me the discrepancy and report to the board about the comparison between the market. You get on TV every day, zero plan. We pay you back the $148 for the Medicare premium and so forth, and yours is in the 300 range or more. It's really not. There is no transparency in this. You pride yourself with the transparency, but there is no transparency in this issue. The other item that I would like, why there is only $4 difference between the Medicare Gold and the Medicare Platinum on the PERS Platinum Gold. Why don't you merge them and allow the family to go in either one, like the basic rest of the family in any of the other plans? It will simplify it for you and will make it cost effective. There is some minor differences between the two plans, but $4 difference between two plans, you try to manage two different plans in Medicare? That doesn't make any sense. I would like to have somebody call me. You guys pride yourself with transparency, and I have so many emails that were ignored. I tried to contact Mr. David Miller by email. He ignored my email either. I also tried to contact Ms. Brown, and she took care of it, and she promised me that somebody will contact me, but nobody contacted. And I would like to have
Sir, your time is up, but I think we'll ask. Your time is up, but I'll ask Mr. Fox to get your information, and we'll have someone call you. Thank you.
Please, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fox, the next person.
Yes, Mr. President. The last caller here today is Mr. Neil Johnson. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hello.
Okay. Hi, this is Neil Johnson. I am now a retired member of the system. I used to, for years, represent SEIU, and my purpose of call today is to thank Margaret Brown for her service to the board while it was a relatively short period of time. I thank Margaret for her asking questions. I didn't always agree with where she was going with some of those questions or her particular positions on issues, but I did enjoy her inquisitiveness and her desire to dig in. I don't know whether being described as the PERS watchdog was necessarily her helped her, but anyway, I really do want to thank Margaret for her service, and I wish more of the board members would ask more in-depth questions. Anyway, thank you very much, and goodbye.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. It's good to hear your voice. Okay, well, this is our last meeting before the end of the year, and we have Thanksgiving, Christmas, and other holidays that are coming up, and I just Want to wish everyone a happy holiday season, and it was very a good feeling to be back in person and to see faces and to see expressions and to have dialogue. So we want to thank you for those of you that did come out, to some of our stakeholders in the back are here. So it's also good to see you. So with that, we will now adjourn into closed session for items 1 through 3 for the closed session agenda. This will include the following litigation matters: Wedding, Exall v. CalPERS, Kesterson, Exall v. CalPERS, and Leo v. CalPERS. We will also receive the General Counsel's update on pending litigation. After the closed session, the board will briefly report out in open session. So at this time, I ask that the auditorium be cleared, and thank you again for being here. And we will, since the reporter is over 2 hours, we'll give him about 10 minutes before we start the closed session. Okay, thank you.
Get Melissa. The microphone to our CEO, Marcy Frost.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. I just wanted to quickly reassure the board based on the public commenter in open session indicating that our health team had not been responsive to a number of inquiries that he'd made via phone and email. Again, wanted to assure you, also to correct the record, that the health team has been responsive to this particular member and has addressed the questions that he asked of you today.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate you updating us on that. This adjourns this month's Board of Administration and committee meetings. Thank you for joining us. See you guys in January. Thank you.